let's go into our presentation today. And actually, to start us out, we're going to be talking with Brandon Berg, Senior Manager for Partner Programs. Hello, Brandon.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those who are joining us. Want to welcome you today. We have a great presentation. I think something really valuable and actually really applicable to our fourth quarter spiff that we have going on. So Bob Lucas is going to present today talking about the importance of securing DNS. And as part of that, he's going to actually do a data exfiltration demo. And as you can see on the screen now, we've got our spiff program that's running through this fourth quarter, our fiscal fourth quarter, which ends in July. But what our spiff actually does is it's looking for you to generate new opportunities with either new or existing customers, and to take an activity like the data exfiltration demo that you're going to see demonstrated today with companies greater than 1,000 employees. And if at that point you've taken that initial interaction with the customer, and then you've submitted a deal registration and it converts to a pipeline opportunity, you'll be awarded either a $250 gift card or a $500 gift card, depending on the size of the company. And then if that opportunity were to actually close in this quarter, there's an additional bonus of $1,000 or $2,000 respectively based on the employee size. So you're going to learn exactly what you can do with customers and prospects today on this call in order to qualify for this spiff. So hopefully you'll get the skills you need in order to actually qualify for this. And we're looking forward to fulfilling a number of spiffs of the participants that are on today. With that, don't want to delay the program any further and want to get right over to Bob Lucas, who's going to talk to you all about the importance of securing DNS. Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Rick. I hope you can hear me out there. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen so you all can see it. The title slide should say Securing DNS is Fundamental. Hope you can see that. So let's get started. I'm Bob Lucas. Welcome to this Bloxcast. I'm a Senior Global Enablement Specialist at Infoblox. Been with Infoblox about 3 years, and I've trained partners like yourselves all over the world. But today, to Brandon's point, I'm going to raise awareness on a particular type of security threat that's very real. It's showing up in the news all too often. It showed up several times over the last 2 years. It's a threat to businesses everywhere, regardless of their size, location, or type. We're talking verticals, public or private sector, so all types of businesses. And these are some of these are world-class corporations with best-of-breed security stacks. And yet this type of attack is still able to get through and cause damage. So I'm going to talk to you today about securing your DNS, why it's fundamental and essential to a defense in-depth security strategy for any customer's network, regardless of their size, location, or type of business. The presentation portion here will run approximately 35 or so minutes. As Brandon mentioned, we will include a short demo on data exfiltration. Not to worry, there won't be any sensitive data actually transferred. It's going to be bogus data that I've created myself just for purposes of the demo. But I think, whether you're an account manager, a solution engineer, an executive, I'm not going to get technical on this presentation. We're going to keep it high level so that everybody watching here can understand what's going on and make use of it, and hopefully turn it around to actually run this type of presentation and demo for your customers as well. You'll be able to type your questions in the Q&A window throughout this session and at the end, so feel free to jump in with questions anytime, and we'll address them at the end. Okay, so I want to start off with what's the goal of most types of these attacks. So Cisco and Symantec, other security thought leaders, they've done surveys across hundreds of enterprise businesses. And these surveys show that there's malware already inside most corporate networks. I'm thinking specifically of the Cisco Internet Security Report from 2016. Malware is already inside in spite of their security stacks, okay? So malware's #1 goal is stealing information for profit and then selling it on the internet. And with all of the security tools your customers probably have in place today, many of them are best of breed, okay? How is data continuing to leave the environment? Why is this still happening, okay? That's the question. So once malware is in the environment, how does it communicate? How is it grabbing these passwords and credit cards and social security numbers and getting all of this data out without being detected through the security stacks? There's typically only 3 protocols allowed to exit through the firewall. And these are the 3: email, web, and DNS, okay? Now, you've probably heard of all 3 of these, but one of these protocols is not like the others, and today I'm going to explain why. Okay, so first, let's talk about data transportation methods that attackers use and some that they don't use any longer. So first, FTP. I mean, that's an insecure protocol. It's been out there forever. It's typically blocked by the firewall, right? You know, once you're inside of a network, how do you get information out of that network? So when we look at email, we've got solutions out there that do deep packet inspection of email. Some best of breeds are listed here, but of course there are others. Pretty much the same thing holds true for web, right? We get proxies. We can do deep packet analysis, URL filtering. When it comes to DNS, DNS is wide open. There's no built-in security. And the big myth that, you know, frankly, we keep hearing at Infoblox is, the myth is DNS is simple and doesn't require any security, right? Well, on top of that, when we look at these tools and we look at these protocols, email requires our authorization. Web requires authorization. Before we can send an email, before we can get to a website, we're going to be filtered at some point, right? So it has to go through a particular protected server. But when it comes to DNS, no authorization required. Email and web usually have proxies as well for several reasons, right? DNS does not require a proxy. So no authorization, no authentication required, and no proxy on DNS. Now, if you were the attacker, picture yourself as the attacker for a minute. This is an easy question. Which protocol looks the easiest to take advantage of? Which protocol would you attempt to exploit if you were the attacker? Well, it's an easy answer. It's DNS. And so DNS is now the #1 data communication method used by malware. And the challenge with traditional security systems is they have limited visibility into DNS and they don't focus on DNS-related threats, right? So they just pass DNS traffic. So we have a fundamental problem here. Current security stacks don't catch it, don't detect it, but Infoblox does. And I'm going to talk about why and how. Let's take a look at why securing DNS is important and why the bad guys love DNS. So everything in your network, in your organization, is going to use DNS before it connects to anything on the internet, simply put, all right? Laptops, endpoints, servers, single sign-on servers, virtual machines. To get from one site to the other, they have to do some type of DNS request initially, okay? So it's used for all kinds of connectivity. And DNS, by the way, it was created in 1983. It's more than 30 years old. The whole purpose of DNS was it was created so that people wouldn't have to remember the public IP address of every server on the internet. They could just simply put in a URL, a domain name, right? Like, do you remember the public IP of google.com? I sure don't, so probably not, right? So all of those IPs are controlled by those servers, and it requires DNS to match the IP to the domain name. That's really all we use DNS for. So DNS is critical networking infrastructure. Everything uses it. Everything requires it, and without it, your business literally comes grinding to a halt if DNS goes down, okay? Secondly, DNS is a protocol that's easy to exploit, and attacks are prevalent today. Attackers can't be traced because it's a fire and forget protocol with no built-in security, no built-in logging, and DNS was never designed with security in mind. And there's been some extensions built over the years since then, but DNS is still a very unsecure protocol. Everybody should know that. Thirdly, traditional security is ineffective against evolving DNS threats. And I use the term evolving because it's one thing to list IP addresses and malicious servers and hosts and bots on a blacklist, right? And then pass that blacklist around, share it with your threat intelligence partners so that everybody knows not to go to that site and block that site. It's another thing to run unknown DNS attacks and zero-day DNS attacks. Those are the types of DNS attacks that are most successful, they're doing the most damage, and they're the ones that won't show up on anybody's blacklist. That's where Infoblox provides unique value in stopping these types of unknown and zero-day DNS attacks. That's what we're going to talk about today, okay? So DNS is now the #1 communication method used by malware, and all of this, I'll call it DNS amnesia. You know, these companies realizing that DNS is in the back end and just doesn't matter, they don't monitor DNS as deeply as they should. This is the amnesia that I'm talking about. This is what made attackers exploit DNS and made it the #1 communication method used by malware. So here's the irony, right? All of the companies you see here have extensive security stacks. Right? Chipotle, Tesco Bank, Bank of Brazil, Intercontinental Hotel Group, right? These are world-class companies, even the Department of Homeland Security, and there are many more like these. So all of these companies have the best security tools in place, and yet they continue to get hacked and data leaves their organization. Credit cards, social security numbers. We've heard of Anthem Healthcare, right? We've heard Sony, we've heard Target, we've heard Home Depot. These were all DNS-based attacks. What's most frustrating is, you know, there's security vendors that they do business with. The vendors out there are telling these customers that they're secure, they're protected. And then the next thing you know, sensitive data somehow finds its way out of the network. They're facing fines, class action lawsuits, and sometimes irreparable brand damage. Okay, so I want to take a step back here. How does malware get into their protected networks in the first place? How does that part of it happen? I want to look at this, the way the endpoint initially becomes infected. And this shouldn't be brand new news to everybody, right? So there's a typical scenario we have here. An executive whips out his laptop at Starbucks or somewhere outside of the corporate network, connects to their local Wi-Fi, starts to do a little web surfing, clicks on some ads for things like hot stock buys and checks emails, and then opens up an attachment in the email and responds to some ad. And what happens, right? Phishing happens. Malware is planted on the laptop. There's an attachment that's malicious, drops malware on the laptop, and that's where it all starts. Okay? So we can see some of this information is pretty startling. Phishing campaigns are up 244% from 2014. You know, Google's had an issue recently as June 1st of this year. So I want to stop here for a moment, and I want to ask everybody a polling question. I'm going to stop for a moment and let you all think about this. If you had to guess how many of these phishing emails, these emails with malicious attachments, how many of these emails are floating around the internet on a daily basis? How many of these malicious emails are in circulation every second on every day, in average? Just go ahead and take a guess. We're putting the poll up on the screen right now. So choose one of those options on the screen. We'll give you about 30 seconds to answer it.
On half of you replied. Please go ahead and click the correct answer, the one you choose in the poll window, and then click submit.
If you want a little hint, I'm happy to give you a little hint. This is kind of a tough question. So the hint is you'll be very surprised. Okay? I think you're going to be surprised.
Okay, I think we've got it, Bob.
Okay, so let's take a look at the results. Hey, Rick, we did pretty well. They got the right answer. If you got the right answer, it's 350 malicious emails per second are being delivered globally. 350. Now, the engineers in the audience, I'll let you guys do the math on some calculator. I can't do that math in my head fast enough. I'm way too old. But think about the probability of anyone, anywhere, at any time, opening one of these attachments, right? And think about the probability of that happening. The more emails, the higher the probability. And all it takes is how many people, how many attachments? Just one. It only takes one to infect that endpoint and cause a major problem inside that network. So, I mean, it should be no surprise that Cisco reports prove that phishing campaigns are up 244% from 2014. And we see that stat on Google on the right-hand side of your screen. It should be pretty startling. So that's why these phishing campaigns are effective. That's the #1 method that these attackers are using to get information out of the network and social engineer somebody or something inside the network to do their dirty work and start the process. And the net is, hey, malware happens. This is why these reports say there's malware in just about every corporate network that they see, is because, you know, people don't take the security awareness training they need, or they don't take it seriously, and this happens. Even people that do take the training still sometimes don't know the difference between a legitimate and a phishing email. So think about that probability, okay? When you got that, now let's take a look at how sensitive data actually gets stolen over DNS. So before that endpoint goes to any website, it's going to need the website's IP. Remember, we said that DNS is going to match a website's public IP to a domain name. So I don't remember the IP to hacker.com, which is our test malicious server here. So, but I do know hacker.com. I'm going to let DNS find IP for hacker.com, okay? So our DNS request goes to our local DNS server. It passes right through the firewall. It does not, we don't block DNS on any firewall. We have to keep it open. Remember, DNS is critical technology for any business. We can't let it go down. So hacker.com receives the request, provides its IP. I'm just going to use a fake IP here. And that's sent right back through the same local DNS server down to the endpoint. We've matched the IP to the domain, and now we can get to hacker.com's website. And in the background now, this is bad because hacker.com has identified a vulnerable endpoint. It's logged its IP address, and now there's an encrypted tunnel that it can set up, and it can do a lot of stuff through that DNS server, that local DNS server. Okay, now we can say, you know, and some of these security vendors are going to tell their customers, well, we can blacklist hacker.com. We can blacklist that IP. We can even blacklist the domain if we need to. That's great. But what if hacker.com is an unknown host? What if nobody's ever seen or heard of hacker.com before? What if it's not on anybody's blacklist? What if somebody's spinning up these new domains in Azure or Google, right, or AWS, and it's part of some, or it's part of some domain generation algorithm where domains are randomly generated to cover the attacker's tracks? And these attackers aren't stupid, right? They're not going to keep malicious domains up and online for very long. They're going to change the name. They're going to change the IPs. They're going to obfuscate themselves and their services so that they can't be detected. This is why we see unknown and zero-day DNS attacks that go undetected, and they're the ones that end up stealing sensitive data from the network, okay? So I hope you're getting all this so far, okay? So let's look at what happens next with our DNS connection. So we now have a connection between the malicious server and the endpoint, right? Each knows the other's IP address. Each has identified the other. So this forms what's known as a DNS tunnel. DNS tunnel. So the real fun happens now. Over the same channel, the attacker can upload sensitive data from the endpoint or download more malware onto the endpoint and basically make the endpoint do a lot of bad things on that network. Okay, malware on the endpoint finds a file, for example, with credit card data, looks something like this. And by the way, these aren't real credit card numbers, so don't write these down. But this is what happens, okay? And this credit card number is going to be transferred in small pieces. We're going to cut up this data into very small pieces, and we're going to encrypt each one of the little pieces and send them out to dns.hacker.com. And this is what one of those pieces looks like. Right? Now, you know, this long, ugly alphanumeric string here of numbers and letters doesn't really mean anybody to anything, and it certainly doesn't look like a credit card number, right? So your DLP solutions aren't going to catch it, right? Hacker.com is going to receive this right here. And look how we pass it right through the firewall to the malicious host. And when it gets it, it has an encryption key it can use to decrypt that string back into the original credit card number. And now we have something that we can sell on the dark web. So it copies it to a file and off it goes. Now I can accumulate hundreds or even thousands of these credit card numbers if they're there on that endpoint, simply by making a DNS query. And I can send more commands. I can infiltrate commands into that endpoint to create a botnet or go out and look for other endpoints and other credit card numbers elsewhere. And all of this goes up through the DNS channel. and it's not detected by firewalls, it's not detected by DLP. This is what we're talking about. Okay, so now that I've got you all agape here, I'm going to show you some actual data exfiltration over DNS in a demonstration. Now, this demonstration is probably going to take about 5 or 10 minutes. The data we're going to use is not sensitive. It's just, I created an Excel spreadsheet with some credit card numbers. I have a graphic I can use. I'm using small files just for purposes of the webcast for time constraints. So it's going to be bogus information, but I'm going to be using a real local DNS server, which is not protected by Infoblox. Now, I've informed my ISP already. I've been a good doobie. I've informed my ISP that I'm going to be running this demo. I'm not going to share the name of the ISP because I don't want to get them in trouble and I don't want to get myself in trouble. So you can do this yourself. I'm going to teach you how to do this for your organization and for your customers. You can actually use the local recursive DNS server if it's not Infoblox, and it will exfiltrate simple bogus data as a test, okay? So we have an Infoblox website which has a test server in our hybrid cloud. This is what it looks like, okay? It's called dex.infoblox.com, and I already have this website logged in. So I'm going to switch over to this web session. I hope you can see this. It should say how data exfiltration and DNS tunneling work. Okay, that's the first page I get to when I log in. This is a website that we use exclusively for data exfiltration demos. Okay, the first thing it's going to have me do is it's going to take me to the terms and conditions page, and I don't have to actually click a button. I just have to basically scroll down and just trust me, I've read all that. So, and this is something that's very important. I just want to highlight this for a second. You know, it's very, if you're doing this at another site, especially the customer site, make sure that customer's IT team knows what's going on, because this might set off some ancillary alerts on other security tools. I don't know if it will. I don't know. I have no idea what your customer runs in their environment. But if it does, you don't want to be blamed for it. So just tell them you're doing this test before you do it. Okay. Having said that, you know, you have all these other things over here that we can do. This is only going to be 5 minutes long. I'm going to go to data exfiltration tools, and I'm going to run a program called Hexify. Now, don't let that name scare you, okay, Hexify. All you have to do to run this demo is you select the file, and like I said, I have some credit card numbers here. Just going to give a second. Let's see if this shows up. Okay, can everybody see these credit card numbers? This is the actual spreadsheet that I'm going to try to exfiltrate. All right, I got all these fake credit card numbers and fake information. I also have a logo, little Infoblox logo that I'm going to send over the same channel. All right, so I'm going to start with the logo first because that's a smaller file. I'm just going to open the file, and then this is the tool. It shows me how big the file is, how long it's going to take to upload, so really quick, 12 seconds, and I just click transfer. And look what's happening, right? Does this look familiar? So this is that long, ugly alphanumeric string that I was talking about in small pieces. Every one of these is a small piece of that logo file. And I want to point out something else out. Look how it's going to the same server. This is our malicious test server. Okay, this is our dns.hacker.com server in the Infoblox cloud. These are all going to that malicious server through my local recursive DNS server, right? And it looks like it's done. So I'm going to view the file, and look at that. There's the file in all of its glory, right? So we've just transferred that file over DNS in about 12 seconds. That's how long it took. All right, let me pick another file. Let's go back here and select the file. Go to the credit card numbers. All right, now if somehow I've found this file with credit card numbers, and if I'm the malware, this is what I'm doing. The malware is doing all the things you're seeing here. We're just testing it, but this is what the malware actually does. So same thing, it's going to take that file, it's going to break it up into many, many chunks. It's going to encrypt each chunk so the attacker can't be detected and other tools can't detect it, and it's going to transfer it. And this one's going to take about 36 seconds. Now, you can see the chunks being sent, and you can see the chunks being received over here. And sometimes the receive takes a little while to catch up, but it's the same format, right? Same format. Now, some network engineers might say, okay, well, that's cool. So I can actually set my packet size to a different size. And if the packet is larger than a certain amount, I can just block it. I can set my MTU or something like that. Well, that's fine. But think about this, guys. This attacker, right? This attacker has time. Time is the attacker's best friend. And if the malware's in that environment as a low and slow attack, and nobody knows that malware's in there, and we haven't detected that the malware is doing any damage inside the network, you know, these security alerts aren't going to go off. We probably don't even know it's there, right? So that malware sits there indefinitely, sending these little chunks, chunk by chunk, and the packet size can be set by the attacker. They can change the size of these chunks as small as they want to, and that'll get it through any network, right? So let's view the file. Okay, if I go here, okay, I'm going to save that file right in that same directory. Now it looks like we lost a few chunks in transit, but let's take a look and see if we can open this file here. All right, so it just says, I got to repair the file. Do you want me to repair it? Okay. Looks like it's not coming up. Let me try this. Let's try this one more time. I can go over to here and I can actually see the transferred files. And I got almost all the chunks of it. Let me give it one more try. Could be a bunch of things, a bunch of reasons why it's not fully transferring the file, but let's try this again here. I probably have to. You know what? Let's try a different file. Try a text file. This one's going to take a while, so I may have to get back to that one. But we saw the logo come through, right? So if you're talking about credit card numbers, that's sensitive data. If you're talking about social security numbers, that's sensitive data. It could be anything. It could be financials, company financials. And the larger the file, the longer it's going to take to come through. But the attacker has time on his side. He can wait, right? We can sit here all day and just transfer files. So I'm going to get back to that, okay? I'm just going to minimize that right there and go back to this slide right here. So I hope you get the gist of this. So guys, the fundamental issue with all this malware in corporate networks, think of all the security systems and tools that are sending alerts when they locate this malware, right? At the end of the day, the fundamental security issue is sheer volume. You know, some of these companies only have a handful of security team members and SOC analysts, right? They don't have the time and the resources and the bandwidth to investigate every single alert that comes into that organization, right? So when we look at what's going on here, the statistics here are from the 2017 Cisco Security Capabilities Report and their Internet Security Report of 2017. So let's say you start with 5,000 alerts per day, okay? The security team has to deal with 5,000. That's conservative, by the way. So right off the top, Cisco says that 44% of those alerts, that's 2,200 alerts, are not even being investigated. Why? Why aren't those alerts investigated? It's time and resources. If you have a handful of staff, like I said, how can you possibly keep up? Right? Something's going to fall through, but it gets worse. It gets worse. Out of the 56% of alerts that are investigated, only 28% are deemed legitimate. The rest are mostly false positives. 54%, in the bottom right of your screen where it says 54% of legitimate alerts cannot be or will not be remediated. So we have alerts that we know there's something in the network, but we're not going to remediate, or we can't. And again, I ask why. Why is this? For example, we knew we were supposed to patch Windows XP, but hey, that's an unsupported operating system, right? That hasn't been supported for over a year. We know we have a few laptops or virtual machines running Windows XP in our environment. We just couldn't get around to it with all the other stuff that's happening. So, and now one of those machines has been compromised by the WannaCry ransomware, right? And now we have a big problem. This is what I'm talking about. So I'm just gonna put a number to this, okay? All right, 54% of legitimate alerts not remediated. That's 424 alerts out of the original 5,000. Are you willing, if you're the customer, right, are you willing to say that it's okay that 424 security alerts in my environment are legitimate and we don't have time to remediate them, or we can't? Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Customer? So I ask why. Now, we said earlier that security teams don't have the time, right? That's the #1 reason we hear at Infoblox is, you know, we get more alerts than that. We just, you know, we'd love to have a security staff of 10 or 20, but we don't. So I want you to look at #3 and #4 on the right side of your screen here. This is the other problem. Besides the time and resource deficiency, right, and the low risk level, some of these tools aren't looking at DNS the way they should be, and I mentioned that earlier, okay? So, and then an advanced persistent threat, the whole nature of advanced persistent threats, that they're unknown, some of them are 0 days, they do no apparent damage on day 1, they get in there and they sit inside the network for days and sometimes even weeks and months, right? So on day 1, it doesn't do any damage, but on day 2, is it a botnet? Is it a ransomware? What is it? Think about that for a moment, all right? Legitimate security alerts indicate malware and APTs are in your network today. There are security reports from 2016, 2017, Cisco, Symantec, Imperva. There are other companies that concur with this, and some have even proven this. They've proven that malware is in some of these corporate networks. We need to disrupt the malware's DNS communications where it counts, at the DNS server, at the internal DNS server, because no other security tools are looking at that internal DNS server like Infoblox is. And we need to stop the malware there and not downstream in the network, because once it gets past the DNS server, there's a direct connection through the firewall to the malicious host on the internet. I just showed you that earlier, okay? So we need to stop it where it counts, at the internal DNS server, before a host can plant more malware in our network. Okay, so you have security tools in your environment, web filtering, vulnerability scanning, SIMs for aggregation and correlation of alerts, right? You have endpoint security to clean off malware and quarantine endpoints. Maybe you have sandboxing. Maybe you have next generation firewalls, some of the best in the world with threat intelligence feeds, but none of these is looking at DNS traffic deeply enough to find the unknown data exfiltration threats that we see in the news all too often, right? And I go back to those same Cisco reports, okay? They say to investigate and understand the greater slice of the threat landscape, organizations need to rely on automation as well as properly integration solutions. So it's automation and integration, guys. So it's 3 things we need. We need to automate, integrate, and stop malware's use of DNS at the source, the internal DNS server. We need to give security teams more time to investigate the legitimate alerts they find, more context around these alerts, and better integration between systems and other threat intelligence platforms so they can share that data with best-of-breed security partners. All right. Now I get to how can Infoblox help? Because we can actually help in all 3 of those areas: automation, integration, and stopping malware's use of DNS at the source. You're probably wondering, well, how does Infoblox know so much about the network, right? You know, what else are we besides a DNS server? Well, we're at the core of your network. We're also, in addition to your DNS servers, we're also your DHCP servers. We're also a single authoritative source of IP address management. And the single authoritative source of IP address management is literally a goldmine of information for the security teams. Why? Because they don't want confusion and ambiguity around IP addresses pertaining to malicious devices on whether they're outside or inside the network. They want one single source of IP address management so they can see and identify that device. They know where it is, they know who's using it, what's the status, and how do I remediate it? If it's unmanaged or a rogue device, how do I remediate that? Infoblox provides your security teams this very valuable data context around whether something deserves more attention or not. So if they get a security alert and they need this context, how do you know? Like if all you get, if you're a security engineer and you get a security alert, right? If all you get in that alert is a device name and an IP address, Is that good enough to tag a device with a security alert? Is that good enough to ring the fire alarm at your company? Right? Would you bet your job on it? Probably not, right? You want a lot, your security guys, trust me, they're going to want a lot more data than that. They're going to be questioning that network team, and they may get frustrated if they don't have Infoblox in that environment, that they can't get the contextual data they need to accurately identify security alerts. So DHCP and IPAM tell us what's connected, where it is, who's on it, and the status of that device on that network, right? And we have, we cover those bases here at Infoblox. DNS, on the other hand, tells us where that device is going, what it's doing on the network. So think about that. Now, we mentioned APTs earlier, right? We might find an unmanaged device that we don't know where it came from or how it got in, and it's not, we don't have a lot of information about it, right? All we have is an IP and some device name. So is it really good enough to know that that's on the network and it's identified, so to speak, right? But because it's not doing any apparent damage or going anywhere on the internet, do we need to worry about it? Right? Really? So this is what I'm talking about. That's what the attackers want you to think. That's why they call APTs low and slow. It's a good reason. You need context behind what it's doing and where it's going on your network. This is where Infoblox can really help expose something like this. This is why securing your DNS is fundamental, because we provide contextual data from the core of the network that both network teams and security teams can use immediately. Okay? And what they can do with this data is they can accelerate time to remediation through automated sharing. We can share DNS indicators of compromise from that same local DNS server, and we can pass that data in common security formats to other security tools in your architecture. So Infoblox is already integrated with the best-of-breed security vendors and tools you see here, and there are more integrations coming soon. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, okay, so we have, these are the current integrations. You probably recognize a lot of those names, I hope, right? We're already integrated with those companies today. These and more are coming soon. You probably recognize those names in some cases. If your customer has any one of these in their environment, any one of these vendors, any one of these tools, you need to talk to them. You need to talk to them about our actionable network intelligence, DDI, and also what we can do to stop DNS-based data exfiltration, even unknown DNS-based data exfiltration. So you could have any of these tools. Each tool does an important job for your security posture. Okay, I want to be very clear about this. We are not competing and we're not replacing any of these that you see here. We're not replacing those. We can't do what those tools do, and we don't want to. We're not in that business. But they can't do what we do because they're not in the same place in the network as Infoblox is. Look where Infoblox is in this picture, right? It's at the bottom. Where is it? It's at the bottom of the screen, right? We're the core of the network, okay? We collect the DNS alerts, indicators of compromise. We have all of the DHCP, like MAC address, lease information, that we can pass on to these tools seamlessly. And we combine those with all of this other data. We simply put, we can take all of this data and leverage it across all your other tools, so they leverage the data and they can do their job better. That's very simply put. We help those other tools do their job better. So securing your DNS is fundamental. Sharing your DNS data is a bonus. And by the way, if you don't see a vendor here on the screen that your customer, your customer has in their environment, we can have that vendor use our REST APIs. And this is how new vendors can integrate with Infoblox, and they do it all the time. They can leverage our open REST APIs and build their own integration on that platform and share data the same way. Okay, so I have a polling question, one more, and that's how aware are your customers about DNS threats and attacks? Not necessarily data exfiltration. Let's open this up a little bit. What about DDoS attacks from DDoS? What about the Dyn attack that happened last October? What about the malware that was found by the Cisco Talus group in February, the malware that uses DNS text records to transfer PowerShell commands? How aware are your customers about any of those DNS threats and attacks? So we'll put up the poll on the screen right now. I want you to choose one of these options, and we'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, are they very aware and they've taken action already? Are they aware but they haven't done anything yet? Are they aware but they're not really concerned, they don't really care? Or are they just not aware? Go ahead and select one of these.
About half have responded. Please check the correct answer and then click Submit. Okay, I think that's about what we're going to get, Bob. Here we go.
Okay, let's take a look at the results. Thank you, Rick. Wow. Okay, that's surprising to me. So a good third of these customers are not even aware, and equal amount, they're not really concerned. They know about it, but maybe they're saying, hey, it can't happen to me. Yeah, that happens to the teams that don't have good security teams, right? That happens to the companies that can't afford good security tools and systems. Can't happen to me. Well, guess what, guys? I mean, for your business and our business, that's probably what you want to see. I hate to say it, but this is what I'm talking about. These companies don't detect these things. Okay. Thank you for doing that, Rick. That's a great poll. So before we take questions in the Q&A window, I have some more questions for you. So that concludes my part of the broadcast. Maybe we'll get back to the demo and just see if that file transferred in a second. But before we do that, some questions for you guys to think about. Did this help? Was it simple enough to understand? Did we boil down the technical information far enough so that you can understand what was going on and understand and agree that it's a threat and that your customer probably doesn't know what's happening in their own environment? Did this presentation help you sell Infoblox DNS security? Did we miss anything? Did you see something that you want to see more of? Do you believe that DNS is a security risk? Okay, not just for your customers, but for anybody using a DNS internal server. Okay, so think about those questions as we jump into the last slide. And Rick, if I could just jump back to the web thing right here. We're about maybe 30 seconds or so away from being done here. So let's just hold up with the question and answer if we could for a moment. Let's let this finish out. Actually, less than 30 seconds that was.
Bob, one of the people online, Victor, or not Victor, Brad, asked about this being available, the Data-Exfiltration demo portal. Is that available to partner SEs?
So it's a great question, Brad. Appreciate it. Yes, it is. You have to set up an account on that portal. Let's actually talk after the broadcast, or let's chat after the broadcast is over, and we'll help you set that up. But the answer is yes. Okay, I think we're in luck here, guys. It looks like we received all the chunks. So if you remember, this was a text file. Now, before I do this, I want to prove that I'm not doing black magic here. Okay, so before I even view the file, I want to show you what I just transferred. All right, it was just a simple text file. Here it is. Everybody see that? So it's stuff from our blog, some events at Infoblox, and there's some links in here. Right? This is the text file. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to view the file. I'm going to save it. I'm going to open it up. And look at that. It's as good as new. All of this, picture this being financial information, quota attainment, financial results, intellectual property, social security numbers, credit card numbers, right? I'm almost tempted to go back and do that credit card file, but I know you guys got a bunch of questions. So have I proven that we could do this through a local unprotected DNS server? Have I proven that DNS is important to secure? Have we proven that securing DNS is fundamental? All right, let's take your questions, guys. I'm going to open up my chat window. How is Infoblox able to detect DGA? So for those of you that don't know what DGA means, that means Domain Generation Algorithm. So thank you for that question, Victor. It's kind of a longer technical answer than I have time to talk about here in the webcast, but I'll give you the short, non-technical summary. We have rules that, that can detect behavior consistent with that of a DGA. So for example, changing the domain very quickly over a certain period of time. We also have protection against websites, hosts known for infringing DGA attacks, for sending DGA attacks. DGA is clearly one of the things we can protect against. And again, for more information, I would suggest you talk to your friendly local Infoblox account SE. These guys go through training on this kind of stuff, and they can help you kind of boil that down further. But we definitely do cover domain generation algorithm attacks. Does anybody else have any other questions? If you do, just go ahead and chat them into your Q&A window.
Bob, could you explain a bit more about how the account is set up and how people can, how these SEs we got online now can use this demo portal?
Yeah, I can try to do that. I'm not the one that sets up the accounts, so I don't know the exact mechanics of how the accounts are set up.
Well, just how they go about it and how we can get that information to them.
Okay, all right, got it. The best way to do it is if you go to dex.infoblox.com. Let me just bring it up one more time here.
You'll need to share your screen again. I'll stop sharing mine.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Okay. All right, let me just log out. So, all right, so this is the website, dex.infoblox.com. DEX stands for data exfiltration, but you guys knew that. If I put my email in there, you know, and I'm going to get an error message, obviously, and I'll, you know, I think there will be a set up new account somewhere. There should be a link. I don't remember if it's on this screen.
There's a register. Is that a register, a hot link right above?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. There it is. It didn't look like a hot link for me. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, there you go. So you can register. This is a new thing. I haven't seen this yet. So this is email, and then you create a password. Okay, perfect. So you got a name, country. And the reason they want this information is they want to know it's just you and not a real attacker doing these tests. That's why we, you know, you're being tracked, just so you know. So every time you exfiltrate a file, data, whatever it is, it shows up on a log inside this portal, and it shows up on a log inside the Infoblox Cloud Administration portal. All right, so this is, you know, don't send any confidential information, whatever you do. So that's how you do it. So you'll get an email after you do this, and then you'll be able to log in with your, you know, username and password.
Don't see any other questions coming in yet.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, guys, thank you. I hope this was very helpful. And, you know, you'll certainly be hearing more about this. I hope this resonated. I hope you'll contact us for more information about why securing DNS is fundamental. You're certainly going to hear more about securing DNS over the next several months, so get ready. If you want to hear more information, we're happy to provide it. We're ready. And we're ready for you guys to hit the streets and sell this stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. That was a terrific presentation. I don't think I've ever seen a demo that was quite as captivating as that. To actually see the data being exfiltrated and to see you then open what was exfiltrated and show us that complete file, that really speaks volumes. That's great. Well, thanks for being with us. We have a little bit of information for you once again to tell you about that promotional spiff for partners. And here's Brandon Burke to take us out.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Bob. What a great presentation. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this exact demo that Bob provided to you is one of the ways that you can qualify for our spiff this quarter. So hopefully you come away, you know how to register for that. If you do have any issues, questions, in addition to what happened today or afterwards, and you feel like, I should have asked that, go ahead and typing an email address that you can message to us afterwards. You can send it to channelprograms@infoblox.com. If you have questions about the SPIF or anything like that, we will definitely send out the presentation as well as a recording of it to everybody who attended and anybody who registered as well, so that we'll make sure you have this on hand and are able to use it and reference back to it as needed. But again, thank you so much for joining. One final thing, we do have a great opportunity called Cricket Loo Live that's coming up on June 20th. I'm putting the link to register in there. That this is kind of a follow-up to this exact conversation. It's going to go a little bit deeper. It's intended for our customers, prospects, which you can invite your customers and prospects to as well. But it's going to be a great session that's with Cricket Loo, who's our Chief DNS Architect at Infoblox, and Dr. Paul Vixie, who's the Chairman and CEO of Farsight, big pioneer in our community. So two great industry thought leaders are going to lead, and we're hosting these across the U.S., as well as an entire virtual presentation. But if you can get to a location in the U.S. or your customers can, we actually are going to have some hands-on labs surrounding this, so customers can see something similar to this as far as a demonstration of why some things are just so critical when it comes to securing DNS. So both of those things are in the chat window if you want to take those with you. But thanks again for attending today's presentation, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Bloxcast. Have a great day.